And this makes sense to me, and this is how I do it. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you will, maybe you won't, I don't know.
Wait, what? Another card scraping video? I do a couple of things that are a little bit different, and I always get ultimate results. I'm going to break this down into 3 parts. Let's head into my shop. All right, you can see I have a few scrapers here, and this block of wood, we'll talk about that more in a bit. It actually has a bandsawed kerf, and typically those 2 smaller scrapers fit easily, but I've been using this and it's gotten wet and kind of swelled. So one of those scrapers doesn't fit, and this one certainly won't. This one's substantially thicker. So typically, I like using the block in the vise to hold the 2 smaller scrapers. It keeps them from flexing. But this larger, dark colored scraper is quite rigid. So you can just hold it in the vise. See here, typically I can put it in this block with just a slight amount protruding where you can just barely feel that. I would put that in the vise, and then I can run a file across it. And anytime I'm honing or burnishing an edge of a scraper, I like using oil. I don't get picky on what I'm using. Some 3-in-1, some WD-40, just something to lubricate that steel. Now this process would be used if you were sharpening or honing a brand new scraper, or if you had a hook established on a scraper, you had used it several times and that hook wasn't holding anymore. Now it's time to reestablish that edge. Now obviously the goal here is to file that edge, but what we're doing here is we're cutting that metal. We're getting rid of an old hook if there was one. If it was brand new, then we're simply cutting past where the machine may have rolled that over when they stamped these out. And I don't think all brands are like that, but some of them do get stamped when they cut these to size, and that process rolls that edge over. And when you're filing, you have to get beyond that. You have to get past that rolled edge. I think a lot of times when people are starting out, they try to sharpen and hone a scraper. They try to create a hook. None of that will happen correctly if that edge is rolled. So make sure when you're filing, you get past that. Of course, if this is an older used scraper, then that should happen relatively quickly. And as you're filing, you can see I have my fingers curled underneath, and the goal, as I mentioned before, is to make a 90-degree cut. And you'll know you've gone enough when you have a slight burr on the corners or the edges. And this burr is different than the cutting burr that we're going to produce here in a bit. Now scrapers come in all different sizes and thicknesses and shapes. You can see how flexible that one is. This one is pretty thick. It does not flex very easily. And this other smaller scraper is my thinnest, and this one's for doing fine work. It flexes easily. As a matter of fact, if I had it in the vise like this, you can see that it flexes too easily, so I could either drop it down, right? Or better yet, I can slip it in this block. The goal here is to have it protrude just slightly above the top surface. I can squeeze it in the vise, just like that. And then I could hone that edge with a file. So here I can just feel this tiny little burr. This is not our cutting hook. This just means I've moved metal all the way to the corner. All right, let me show you something. This scraper in particular has some kind of a coating on it, but you can see that area there and there. Those are low spots. If I flip it over, it's a high spot on the other side, which means that metal is not flat. We have to get that flat. And I've already done this, and the cutting edge is plenty flat, but just to show you, I'm going to go through the process a little bit more. I like using a push block to keep everything flat. I'm using some soapy water on a diamond stone. This is probably a 300 grit. If it's really severe, or if you have a brand new scraper that was stamped out and those edges are rolled, you might have to start with something rougher, maybe a 120 grit diamond. The goal, of course, again, is to have a face and one edge perfectly 90 to each other. We already used a file to hone that edge or to file that edge until we felt a slight burr, right? Meaning that 90-degree face and edge are coming to an exact 90-degree eris. We'll just go back and forth till we get the job done.
All right, so you can still see a little bit of a low spot there, but the cutting edge goes all the way across. There's about an 1/8 inch of cutting edge. So maybe next time I'll further flatten that till I can get most of that out. And of course, this side looks beautiful. So here's another scraper that is quite different, and I don't like that. Looks like glue or something. Maybe I should edit that. Anyway, this is by Stuart McDonald, and this is quite substantial in thickness, a hefty 1/8 of an inch, and you're certainly not going to bend that, at least I wouldn't be able to. But these are sharpened differently. With these, you create an 1/8 inch concave edge all the way around the perimeter. And I have a YouTube video on how to sharpen this. I'll leave a link in the description. Stuart McDonald, the ultimate scraper. These things are fabulous.
Okay, hey, real quick, let me show you this. This is my square that I use when I'm sharpening, and it's pretty square, which is important for a square, right? What I love about this thing is I can get it wet. It's made of aluminum. Fabulous. This thing is by Seneca Woodworking. I love this little dude. And I didn't want to bore you, so I went ahead and went through a 600 and a 1200 grit diamond to further flatten this scraper. And now we can begin to refine this edge. You can see I'm using this block of wood that keeps the edge square to the face. I believe this is a 1200 grit stone diamond. And just work that back and forth. Of course, the goal here is to get rid of any of those marks left behind from the file. You will see them as little scratches. And you just need to work that back and forth till all those scratches are gone. Again, we're refining the edge. I like doing this on a diamond because that concentrated edge into a waterstone can just make a mess of your waterstones. Even if you're trying to move that across the stone slightly, it can dig in. And now we can see that edge just looks beautiful, clean, reflective, and polished. All right, I don't know why, but this is my favorite part. Moving over to my glass shapton. This is a ceramic stone, and they wear, they don't wear as fast as a waterstone, but they need to be flattened constantly. And of course, as I'm moving this scraper back and forth, I'm also moving it across the stone so I don't wear a groove in my ceramic stone. Periodically when I'm sharpening, if I'm doing very much, I will rinse off my solid surface holder and all the accompanying stones and get a fresh start. Here I'm going through the same process for my smaller scrapers. All right, so these thinner scrapers have already been honed with a file and refined on their faces. I just need to do the edges. And you may have noticed I like to spray the side of that block with some soapy solution just so it'll glide a little bit easier. Same as before, keep it moving across the stone. Lather, rinse, repeat. Now I think a lot of times this step gets skipped, and it's okay because the card scraper will still cut. But I like further refinement of these edges because oftentimes I'll use these scrapers for scraping a finish like a conversion varnish or a lacquer, and those delicate surfaces need a fine edge. As I mentioned earlier, these ceramic stones, they need flattened, and I believe I have a 1200 grit diamond here. A little bit of water. Just work that back and forth. Try to be consistent. And it doesn't take much, but when it sticks, you know it's flat. I just take it over to the sink to release it, rinse it off. Sometimes I'll use a pencil to put a grid, which is pretty typical, so you can keep track of your progress easily, right? Of course, I don't like doing this too much because they wear out, and stones are expensive. I've gone through a few water stones, and they seem to wear faster than these ceramic stones. I really like these shafted. I'll leave a link in the description. Yeah, man, that is beautiful, right? Oh yeah. Incidentally, I should mention, so I have two spray bottles here. The left one is just pure water, or just water, plain water. The right one is a soapy solution. And for some reason, Shapton doesn't want you to use soap, so I don't. I just use water, and then I use a soapy solution with the diamond plates. And this dude here, this is actually made of maple. It's quite a few years old. You can see it has that bandsaw kerf down the middle. And I typically just use that to squeeze my thinner scrapers in the vise.
So once I'm done sharpening, I rinse everything off, of course. I stand my stones on edge, and then I'll move them once. You can see little footprints there. Move everything once, and just to make sure everything's dry so nothing rusts. Of course, this is aluminium. Yeah, man, fantastic.
All right, this is the fun part. Well, it's all fun. So we've filed or honed the edge, then we refined the edge with the stones, and now we are going to burnish the edge. Now, I do an extra step that I don't see a lot of people do. This is how I learned. And so a lot of people will go straight from refining the edge with the stones, and they'll lay the scraper flat and they'll draw that hook out. What I like to do is mash that steel back into itself by putting it in the vise, holding the burnishing rod 90 degrees to that edge, always using oil, mashing that steel back into itself. I'll do all my scrapers, and then we'll draw out the burr.
All right, so everybody has their own little ways of doing things, their little secrets. One thing I never see mentioned, and this makes sense to me, and this is how I do it. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you will, maybe you won't, I don't know. But what I do is when I draw this out, just for the first couple of passes, I'm angling the burnisher, like this, and I'm drawing this, and you'll notice the end is coming toward me. That's pulling the metal this way. Instead of just going straight across, I believe that pulls the metal a little bit easier. And so I just do a couple of strokes with that position. So here, drawing it, then this way, and drawing that metal this way. Once you get that done, then you can just go back and forth. A little bit of oil. Again, we're going to draw that out. I believe that angle makes a difference. And then here, I'm just 3/4 to an inch away.
The faster the better. I kid. And I'll probably do 25, 30 strokes, something like that.
And if you were to look at this under magnification, that would be U-shaped with these edges or these corners drawn this direction. So I'll keep track of that. I'll do all these edges.
And technically, you could put a burr on all 4 edges, but I just do the 2 long opposite edges. And actually, that DFM Toolworks only has 1 edge. Now, I don't always use this block for this step, but it seems very well supported, putting it in the block, and also it keeps oil out of the jaw vise leather. Maybe not a big deal, but I don't know. And I like showing options. Okay, so now is where we form that hook or shape that burr. Here's where we're taking that edge and rolling that steel back over to form the cutting hook, cutting burr. William Burr. So I start at 90 again, pushing that steel back down, and then I start rolling over a degree or so. Just swipe it a few times. Doesn't take a lot of pressure. Hear that? That's lovely. Same thing on the other side. And I'll go maybe between 2 and 3 degrees, 5 degrees max probably. All right, listen. That's the burr we're after. That's the cutting burr. That burr is different from when we make a burr when we're using a file or a hone. Make sense? So again, start 90 and then slowly roll that edge over. Same thing on the other side. Nice. And here you can see I'm not using a block. It's not absolutely necessary. I believe some kind of oil is necessary. The card scraper is such a versatile tool. Once you start to use it, you will not believe how you did without it. And you'll use it all the time. I mean, all the time. They're perfect for scraping veneers flush. You can scrape exotics, curly grain, unruly interlocking grain, and much, much more. Try to find a good one, good steel, good quality steel. And also you can find them in different configurations for doing coves, inside coves or outside radiuses, gooseneck scrapers. You can make your own out of banding, just regular steel banding. Sharpen it, hone it the same way, burnish the hook. I've made custom ones for crown molding. Yeah, fabulous, fabulous tool.
Okay, let's see how we did, which is actually kind of sounds funny because we know it's going to work. So I've got here is a piece of cherry, 7 inches wide. This has been ran through the, let me see, it has mill marks from the planer, joiner, whatever. You can skew it back and forth. You can go straight. You can pull. Right? Beautiful. Now these are Bacos, and they both have this little protective sleeve, which I kind of like, and they're actually getting where they don't fit. They've been sharpened. These are about 20 plus years old, and they don't really fit in the holder anymore, but
I prefer to move the scrapers slow and deliberate. They heat up pretty quick, but the beauty is that you can shift it around. You have 4 cutting edges. Yeah?
Beautiful, right? Let's try something a little more challenging. This is a piece of curly maple, and if I look, this side that was cut at the table saw. This side has been ran through the joiner or planer, probably a joiner, and it has some little ridges from maybe a chipped blade and a little bit of tear out in some of this challenging grain, right? Warped. You can hear it. It's interlocking grain. It's hard, it's soft, and that's why you get chip out.
Well, that's one of the reasons, right? But interlocking grain can be going different directions, and that's why, a sharp hand plane will usually work or sometimes work.
It is smooth. You can see it just...
But a scraper always works.
Cutting. So all 4 of these edges are good.
Incidentally, this would be an excellent time to skew that scraper to prevent creating a washboard effect.
You can feel when it's cutting. If you lay it down a lot, it's going to cut, but really you want to stand it up a little bit more. It'll retain your hook a little bit longer. If you lay it over too much like this, that's really putting a lot of pressure on that hook, and it'll go dull quicker. Look at that. That's awesome. Incidentally, you can use this until it starts to get a little bit dull, and then you don't have to go through that whole process. All you have to do, let me grab my burnisher here. All you have to do is draw that hook back out, stand it up, reshape that hook, and you can go again. And you can do that several times until that edge just can't do its job anymore, and then you'll have to go back and re-hone. But yeah. Anyway, hope you got something out of this video. Thanks a ton for watching.